I was talking to Pat the other morning. I bumped into her outside Lidl, which was a bit of a surprise, as she swears she's never set foot in the place. Far too plebeian for Miss Frobisher, I'm sure. I mean, Waitrose only just makes the cut with her, and she likes to give the impression that Harrods Food Halls are local grocers. She tried to make out she was just passing, but I saw the tulips poking out from her tote bag, and I know for a fact they're from Lidl because I got myself the same ones last week. Anyway, I bumped into her, and she seemed a bit nervous as well. She might be, seeing as her posh shopping cover was almost blown. I think she was trying to distract me, because she edged away from Lidl's door and put a hand on my arm, and she's never even gone so far as to touch me before. And then she asks if I've seen him too. And didn't I think it was very suspicious that he suddenly turns up out of the blue, and Caroline and Trudy are singing his praises to the skies when he's just this nobody? I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Oh, well, you can't have seen him. If you had, you'd know exactly who I mean." I was beginning to get bored as well as irritated by now, but I kept my temper, and I asked her to elucidate. I actually said elucidate. "Darling," I said, "verbal not fair shrew, explain this shit to me. Kindly elucidate." I know she hates swearing in any kind of Americanism, but the stupid cow was beginning to get so severely on my tits that I just couldn't resist it. She said, "Oh, he's this friend of Charlotte's husband, just arrived from France, although he's supposed to be English. Tall, blonde, good-looking, and the kind of smile you ought to see on a young girl rather than a man in his 30s. Here, she sniffed, and she actually tossed her head. Or maybe she bridled. I'm never really sure of the distinction between the two. And anyway, I didn't think women did either of them, or if they did, only in Catherine Cookson novels. Not that I've read any, so what would I know? Anyway, I told her he sounded delicious and that I'd keep an eye out for him, but that I really had to crack on because I had a load of work to do at home. She asked if I was still doing the freelance book editing, and the way she said it made it sound like I work as a part-time tart. I don't know what her poor-faced proclivities can have against me being a book editor. Perhaps she thinks I only work on porn. I said yes, and I really must get back to it. Otherwise I'll have no money to pay the rent this month. She looked slightly pained at the mention of rent and put another manicured hand on my arm to detain me. She peered up into my eyes. Oh, she's only 5'0", but refuses to wear heels because she thinks they're common. I've often wanted to ask what she thinks of the royals who wear Jimmy shoes, but she probably thinks the duchesses are common too. She said, "I'm really worried about Caroline. She seems to be completely besotted with this man, and he could be anyone or anything, a con man, a murderer, a terrorist." I said, "Hold up, Patricia. I don't think Daesh are likely to be recruiting Hugh Grant lookalikes. And besides, Carol's a big girl. She can take care of herself now. And anyway, you might want to consider a little thing called slander before you start trotting round the town calling this bloke a murderer. I'd be careful if I were you." If you can believe it, she did the bridling, head-tossing thing again and said, "He doesn't look like Hugh Grant. He looks like the other one with the funny name." Anyway, I didn't wait to find out which other one she meant because by now I'd had enough. So I made good my escape and trotted down the high street as fast as my legs would take me. "Woman's mad," I muttered to myself as I pounded along, scared to look behind in case she was in pursuit. Now, I was still muttering when I reached the bookshop and cannoned into yet another woman, this time the very Caroline we'd just been discussing. She was looking very pleased with herself and let out a shriek of delight when she saw me and grabbed me in a fierce hug. As I looked over her shoulder, I saw the reason she was looking so chipper, coming out of the bookshop, carrying a bag of presumably newly purchased books, and smiling that very little girl's smile that Pat had so disparaged. And I recognised that smile and those blue eyes. and the curly blonde hair that riffled in the slight breeze. The first time I'd seen that smile, hair, eyes, etc., had been in the dock of the local Crown Court last year, where I'd been doing a stint as a part-time court clerk. I'd been arraigning him for committing a fraud on a well-off woman in late middle age by persuading her to give him all her money so that he could set up a drama school for disadvantaged children, which of course never materialised any more than the money did. She's lost everything, this poor woman. But sadly for the prosecution, she was a bad witness, contradicting herself and finally ending up in hysterics in the witness box. Our boy, by contrast, spoke beautifully. His voice a clear but gentle murmur that was full of respectful regret. And so the defence counsel had no trouble in implying that this accusation was brought by a woman scorned. The jury took only an hour to unanimously acquit him, and he left the dock still smiling that sweet smile. He glanced at me as he walked out of the court door, and I'm almost sure that one of those deep blue eyes twitched in a tiny wink. Now, I wondered if he'd recognise me and remember where we'd met before. Caro turned with joy towards the blonde vision. And she said, "Jamie, this is my old friend Renee. We were at uni together. Renee, this is James McKellen, my new business partner." Now, I remember that in court he was called Tom something, but I strangely recall his surname. Standing now outside the bookshop, he took my hand between his and held it in a warm, tight clasp. And he looked into my eyes. "Got you," I thought triumphantly. I said, "Lovely to meet you, Jamie. Although I'm sure we've met before. Either that or you've got a twin called Tom." I have to admit he was really good. His smile only slightly faltered. "Oh, I don't think so. I'm sure I'd have remembered you," he said. "And anyway, there's lots of blokes round here who look like me." Like hell there are, I thought. But I just continued looking into those deep blue eyes a few beats longer, until Caro said in a slightly strained voice that they really must go because they had an appointment with her accountant. I waved goodbye and stood peering sightlessly into the bookshop window, thinking over the encounter with intense concentration. Half a minute later, I heard running footsteps and I looked around to see Jamie/Tom coming towards me. He stopped, tilted his head in a kind of acknowledgement and handed me a business card. "Call me tomorrow morning when Caro's at the hairdresser's," he said quietly. "I expect we have a few things to discuss." I stepped back a pace and I looked at him, finding it easy to resist doing any bridling. But I let my eyes travel from his feet, up his long legs and body, allowing my glance to linger here and there, and finally reaching his beautiful face. And I said, "We certainly do, Tom." I took the card and I sauntered away, thinking it was rather a long time since I'd had any halfway decent sex.
I have long been a fellow of the theatre. When I played in Lucrezia Borgia, I suffered from stage fright. Madame, I am Petruchio Pandolfo, I stammered. Madame, I am Pandolfo Pet. Pandolfo Pet. Pantuchio Pet. Damn it, who am I? Causing the audience to roar with laughter. That was my education in theater. I suffered from no such stage fright that night. I even played an Indian once, and my brother, he turns to the audience and says, I think he's done well, don't you? In response, the audience applauded loudly and cried, Yes, yes! Now, I played William Wallace and Brutus, having as their theme the killing or overthrow of an unjust ruler, which you could say is kind of an irony for what happened later. Of all my Shakespearean parts, my favorite role was Brutus. Slayer of tyrants. That's what I was born for. Following my performance of Richard III, the Boston Transcripts Review called me the most promising young actor on the American stage. Each day I receive fan mail from infatuated women. They call me the handsomest man in America and a natural genius. All through this devastating war, I have performed for Union and Confederate audiences. Now, one audience is much like another. They applaud, they gasp, shed a tear or two. The audience of Ford's that night were rather shocked, I should think. I gave a good show, I think. Now, I know how foolish I should be deemed for undertaking such a step as this. Well, on one hand, I have many friends and everything to make me happy. To give up all seems insane. But God is my judge. I love justice more than I do a country that disowns it, more than fame or wealth. To this man's appearance, this president's pedigree, his coarse, low jokes and anecdotes, his vulgar similes, and his policy are a disgrace to the seat he holds. He has made the tool of the North to crush out slavery. Now, I told my friends I was done with the stage. The only play I wanted to present henceforth was Venice Preserved. They didn't get the reference. Venice Preserved is about an assassination plot. Suit me well, that role. Destroyer of tyrants. Now, I was in the crowd outside the White House when the usurper gave an impromptu speech from his window. Now, when he stated that he was in favor of granting suffrage to the former slaves, I declared it would be the last speech he would ever make. It was. Something decisive and great had to be done. On Good Friday, now I went to Ford's Theatre to collect my mail. Well, they know me there. Everyone knows me. I can come and go as I please. I was told that he would be coming that very night to see a performance of Our American Cousin. Have you seen it? Well, it's not at all bad. Makes much fun of the British and their insane manners. Yeah, the performance that night was to be tarnished by my own bad performance, and the play would never be thought of as a comedy again. I arrived at the theatre as the performance was continuing. I had taken the opportunity to drill a small spy hole in the back of the president's box earlier in the day to facilitate myself seeing the target before I entered the box. I wanted no mistakes. What a recognizable figure my target was. Hat, beard, that was him even from behind. As Asa Trenchard delivered what I consider to be the funniest line of the play. Don't know the manners of good society, eh? Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, old girl, you sock-dologizing old man-trap. I entered the box, walking stealthily. and placed my 44 Derringer against the back of his head. Still wearing that hat of his, I struck boldly. I can never repent it. I fired as the audience laughed, believing their guffaws would cover the sound of the gunshot so I could make good my escape. I didn't anticipate the presence of Major Henry Rathbone, who tried to grapple with me as if that might save the tyrant from his fate. I bought a knife specifically to deal with any such situation, and I stabbed the Major, and he ceased his grappling. Already there was a commotion on the stairs from where I come, so I leapt onto the stage where I performed many times. It was to be my swan song at this theatre or any. "Sic semper tyrannis," I cried, Latin for "thus always to tyrants." It's Brutus again. Others said I added, "I have done it. The South is avenged," but I don't remember that. Sounds a little too dramatic even for me. And why didn't they applaud? I made my escape through the stage door where once crowds awaited to greet me. I had previously arranged for a getaway horse to be held for me there. It was all planned. Now I took that high-spirited horse and away to the Sakai swamp, where the telegraphic messages couldn't outrun me. 12 days I was running, and I came to the Garrett farm. Good Southern people they were, unaware of the collapse of the Confederate cause and the death of the president neither. I asked them if they would turn in the fugitive if they found him, and the oldest son told me, well, they might, if only that they needed the reward money. I don't blame them for that. They did right in God's eyes. Next day, the police catch up with me, and I try to hide in the barn. No, those scoundrels weren't coming in to fight me, and I wasn't going out there to be shot down in cold blood. They started a fire against that barn, and soon all was smoke and flame, and I knew I wasn't long with freedom. Then, as I tried to stay away from the worst of the conflagration, one of those damn Yankee sharpshooters spots the handsomest man in America and plugs me in the neck. That's for me then. Tell my mother I died for my country. I asked that my hands be raised to my face so I could see them, and I uttered my last words. Useless, useless. And died as dawn was breaking. In my pockets, we found a compass, a candle, pictures of 5 women, including my fiancée Lucy Hale, and this diary, in which I had written of the tyrant's death. Our country owed all her troubles to him, and God simply made me the instrument of his punishment. Now, I've ever held the South was right. The very nomination of that man 4 years ago spoke plainly war upon Southern rights and institutions. The institution of African slavery is one of the greatest blessings God has ever bestowed upon a favored nation. And the tyrant's policy was one of total annihilation for all of us in our way of life. I remembered then that many years before, I had been told by one of these gypsy fortune tellers who read this poem and its lines and all, and pronounced a grim destiny, telling me that I would have a grand but short life, doomed to die young and meeting a bad end. I guess that's right. That's right.
All the girls are getting their shots now. Something to do with preventing cancer or genital warts or something gross like that. But most of the girls are still into the absurd celeb crushes, let alone going at it for real. They're still into like Harry Styles or those BTS dudes. And they're still into the gelled hair, like, just gets on the sheets. Most of them haven't even done it yet. Just try and get what you want. Mr. Michael says my German is really good now, and that maybe I should go to Germany to try it out, talk to real peeps and get into real conversations with them. I quite like the idea. I've always been interested in all that German stuff, all those weird medical explorations. What was that about? What they did to those gays and gypsies and stuff. Total dickheads, right? He told us about it in class, but there seems to be no purpose to it. I mean, it wasn't like they were trying to find a cure for anything. Mr. Michael says it's too difficult to try and understand the horror of it all. How some of those men were just sociopaths. Mr. Michael doesn't wear hair gel. He's sick looking. Really fair. Still, enough about that. I'm on a grind at the moment. I've got these exams coming up and everyone keeps telling me how important they are. And I'm like, chill, I'm good. Still killing it, getting straight A's. Like, what's the problem? I'm doing what I want and I'm doing okay. I've got it on lock. I'm on a roll doing graphs for others, making bags now, and getting the vodka just for doing their homework. You have to keep it low-key, as some of the girls can be so salty. They can be so bitch in your face, you have to stay cool. This idea, though, I couldn't avoid it as it gave me a way to get a handle on it. To get what I wanted. Was him. We've been having sex for about 6 months now. It's not like we're living together or anything, and it's not like we can hire a hotel room. After all, I'm still in school, for God's sake. So we do it in his car. I know him from school, of course, and he gave me a lift in his car. The first time he dropped me off, he asked me about myself, what food I liked, what music I liked, what my thoughts were on climate change were. Of course, the last one set me off. So I went off on a total dickheads in our government. The dudes running companies, issuing all that toxic crap into the environment, killing animals, killing us, dying rainforests. He nodded and he said he agreed with me. He gave me a book to read and I put it in my backpack. Although, I'm not too sure if I believe in any of that stuff though. The next time he sees me, he pulls me to one side of the school gates. He tells me to wait for him up the road next to the park. We don't want the other kids knowing, as they can be so uncool. They chat too much. I knew we'd be doing it more, so I'm up for it. I managed to get rid of my girls after school as they want to hang out. Go to like Topshop or to the movies, so I have to come up with some excuse about having to go home. I walk up to the park and I wait for him. And he pulls up to the curb and he waves me to get in. He asked if I was busy, as if I would have anything to do while he was around. I shook my head. No, not all. All his for the next 2 hours. He nods. Since it's really sunny outside, he asked if we should go somewhere nice, like to the lake or something, anything that I want. And he smiles that lovely smile of his, and I say okay. We drive for a while until the town hits the countryside. Not a lot of people go down there on the weekdays. He brought a blanket to lay on the ground, and he spreads it out with a flourish, like a knight in shining armor who lays down his cape before his lady. I laugh. He runs to the car and pulls out this hamper from the boot. I don't know where he found that, like real posh, wicker and all. The leather straps holding it tight. I noticed the leather straps. They always look so expensive on a hamper, don't they? Looks like something from Liberty's. Me and my girls here, we've seen them when we go out, like cruising the shops, so I know it's well posh. So we sit down by the lake, and the sun is shining through the trees. Then he pops a cork of another fizzy wine, and we sit down and we talk a lot more about what we want in life, and cool and dull things are, and how people in our lives make us depressed. Although I don't get depressed, I kind of just like move on from it and sort stuff out and move through it. After the second bottle, I feel a bit woozy, so he says he better take me home. I don't want to go, but he says it's getting late. That's when he leans in and he kisses me, like full on the lips. All gets a bit heated after that, and it all becomes a bit of a blur. After, he hands me a handkerchief to like wipe myself clean. I mean, how many boys have handkerchiefs to give to their girls after the deed? I mean, he asks if I'm okay, and then he like tells me I'm the loveliest girl he's ever known. After that, he picks me up 4 times a week after school. But we meet a bit further, you know, just in case, to make sure that no one sees us. It all started to change about a month ago. He didn't ask to meet up as much anymore, and when we did go out, he didn't kiss me so much or talk to me. He just did it to me. And then one day, he says he doesn't want to do this anymore. We should stop before anyone finds out. I ask, what is it? Why? He says he feels guilty about his wife. I ask why he's never felt guilty before when we were smashing in his car. He told me not to be so disgusting. Things got really heated in school last week, like really suddenly. The police came in. Turns out Mr. Michael's wife was found dead with a needle in her arm. That's when the police became involved. They've taken Mr. Michael away. Said they found rat poison in her insulin. He's still in prison awaiting trial. I'm still working hard on my exams, just waiting to see what happens. Still the smartest girl in class. I was careful to wear gloves.